We, the peoples.
We the peoples.
We the peoples.
We the peoples of the United Nations.
Determined.
We the peoples of the United Nations determined.
Determined to save
succeeding generations.
Determined to save succeeding generations
from the scourge of war.
And to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights.
Fundamental human rights.
In the dignity and worth
of the human person.
The dignity and worth of the human person.
And the equal rights of men and women.
Of men and women.
And the equal rights of men and women.
And of nations large and small.
And to establish conditions under which justice and respect.
Justice and respect.
Can be maintained.
To promote social progress.
Social progress.
And to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom.
To practice tolerance.
And live together in peace.
To practice tolerance and live together in peace.
To unite our strength.
To unite our strength to maintain international peace and security.
To promote the economic and social advancements of all peoples.
Of all peoples.
All peoples. We the peoples.
We the peoples have resolved
to combine our efforts.
To combine our efforts.
To accomplish these aims.
To accomplish these aims.
To accomplish these aims.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Rajesh Mirchandani, and I'm one of your hosts for We the Peoples 2021, the UN Foundation's annual Global Leadership Awards, coming to you virtually this year. The phrase, We the Peoples, well, that recalls the powerful opening words of the UN Charter. At the end of World War II, the Charter was written to inspire and guide the work of the then new United Nations to create a better world for us all. And for more than 20 years, the UN Foundation's Global Leadership Awards have been our moment to recognize extraordinary individuals and organizations striving to do just that. This year's no different, and we can't wait to introduce you to our honorees. They exemplify bold leadership, big ideas, expertise, and an unshakable determination to deliver progress, qualities our world needs now more than ever. In fact, the UN Foundation was born out of an act of bold leadership. In 1997, Ted Turner at the Global Leadership Dinner announced the creation of the foundation as an international charitable organization to support the UN and UN causes and engage people everywhere in the mission of the UN. And over the years, we've been proud to honor an exceptional lineage of dignitaries, activists, and visionaries. Take a look.
So I decided, though, what would be really exciting to do is I'm going to try my dead level best to create or find a UN foundation.
Seen important progress. Lives saved, wars averted, rights advanced. But our progress isn't a given. Our progress is a choice. Choosing to join in a common fight for what matters in a perilous world is exactly the choice before all of us. And people are making that choice.
just a few of the previous recipients there of the UN Foundation Global Leadership Awards. You also saw our President and CEO, Elizabeth Cousins, who is our co-host today and joins me now. Elizabeth, it's so great to see you.
Rajesh, it is great to be co-hosting with you, and welcome to everyone joining us. We so wish we could all be together, but even virtually, this is a time for friends and community to come together, to celebrate what matters. And we're excited about our incredible honorees this year and the program you're about to see. We're coming to you from our library at the UN Foundation, using a few things we could find to bring you something a little different since we're not physically together. Though, Rajesh, you could have just gotten me flowers. And of course, our UN Charter is always on hand. The last time we were together, the world had never heard the word COVID-19. Now, the tiny virus that carries that name has upended our lives. It's wiped away a generation of progress in so many areas, and it's shown us with bracing clarity how much we depend on each other. Ted Turner's vision when he created the foundation was about exactly that essential solidarity between humans who share a common home and a common future. And that, of course, is what the United Nations is all about, the only place where everyone in the world has a stake and can have a voice. Well, if there was ever a time when we need the voice, the talents, and the imagination of everyone, it's now. We've lost so much in the last year. Today's young people, already the largest generation of youth in history, have lost thousands of hours of schooling due to COVID. They've lost homes due to extreme weather or conflict. They've lost confidence that those in power will make good and fair decisions, not only to combat the crises we face today, but also to build toward a better future. You know, I remember thinking when we created the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015 that my son would be 21 in 2030 when the goals come due. His generation is the 2030 generation. And right now, they will enter the workforce, start families, try to make their way, and inherit a world marked by crises they didn't create. But they'll also inherit a world with dizzying possibilities for human betterment in science, art, even in politics. The headwinds are fierce, no doubt, but the prospects are dazzling, and they depend on us. Here at the UN Foundation, we say we need to act like the world depends on it, because it does. And all of our honorees today reflect that urgency. They have devoted their time, talents, and tenacity to delivering for real people in real ways. They know what's at stake. They know the clock is ticking, and they have each made decisive and extraordinary contributions. So let's move now to our wonderful honorees.
Elizabeth, thank you for those stirring words. And yeah, let's do it. This year, we are inaugurating a new award, the SDG Vanguard Award. The SDGs are the world's plan for a healthier, fairer, and more sustainable world. We're supposed to get there by 2030. COVID has really pushed us off track, but we still have 9 years to go, and we have incredible leaders in every corner of the globe determined to meet the deadline.
This is the decade for decisive action to deliver the SDGs. So every year, with the SDG Vanguard Award, the UN Foundation will honor extraordinary individuals and organizations who are leading the way. This inaugural year, our honors go to 2 exceptional organizations that have already made quantum leaps in SDG progress. Both mobilize knowledge and expertise to help us understand the scale and nature of the problem. Both are inspiring and informing solutions, and both have demonstrated courageous leadership, innovation, and grit.
Our first SDG Vanguard Award recognizes the leadership and contribution of an organization working to ensure a clean energy transition that leaves no one behind and creates opportunities for everyone. For extraordinary leadership to achieve SDG 7 by 2030 and advance the Sustainable Development Goals in the Decade of Action, the UN Foundation SDG Vanguard Award is presented to Sustainable Energy for All.
The award is accepted by Damilola Ogunbiyi, Special Representative of the Secretary General for Sustainable Energy and the CEO of Sustainable Energy for All. And to commemorate the award, we're delighted to welcome back to the We the People stage Jay-Len Boone, a former U.S. youth observer to the UN and the founder of his own youth climate organization in his hometown of San Antonio, Texas.
world is hungry for solutions to global challenges. This initiative provides them on multiple levels.
Thanks to the UN Foundation, it's great to be back at the We the People's Awards. During my time as US Youth Observer, I got to work with so many people at all levels, from senior leaders at the UN to young people all across the United States. And it showed two things. First, that thanks to UNA USA and the UN Foundation, there's a huge grassroots army of support for the UN and the SDGs. And secondly, that people are passionate about progress. When we think about the SDGs, one place we really need to make progress is SDG 7, the goal for affordable and clean energy. That means aligning many stakeholders from governments to businesses and consumers. Sustainable Energy for All is an international organization now in its 10th year that brings together all these different perspectives and voices and ideas to help us get a sustainable energy future that works for everyone as fast as possible. The SDG Vanguard Award is presented to SE for All, and I'm joined by its CEO, Damilola Ogunbiyi. Damilola, welcome. First off, congratulations to you and SE for All on this huge honor of being named the inaugural SDG Vanguard Award winner. Second, I have to say that I, along with many other youth advocates around the world, are so inspired by your work on SDG 7. And so to kick off the conversation, can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in this work and what inspires you?
Well, thank you for having me. And I have to pinch myself that we are the inaugural winners of this great prize, especially for such an amazing institution as United Nations Foundation. For me personally, coming from Nigeria, what I have always seen throughout of my life is poverty, really, and energy poverty. Being one of the more fortunate people, I had dyslexia at age 10, and my mom had the means to move me to boarding school in England, and I got all this great education. And I just felt that with all these things happening, what does the average Nigerian or the average African have at the end of the day? Being born Black African, you're already at 20 times the disadvantage in terms of energy poverty than anybody else in the world. And I just found it very, very unfair. So from quite a young age, I'm an engineer by background, always wanted to build for developing countries. And, stumbled on energy probably when I was about 25. And I felt that, wow, energy is that golden thread. If you think of all our other sustainable development goals, you really can't achieve a lot of them if you don't have energy as a bedrock. So it might sound very funny to you, but at 25 years old, I walked up to the governor of Lagos State, which is the biggest state probably in Africa, 21 million people. And I said, I want to do an energy project for you. Please let me do it. Of which he laughed and everyone else laughed. But he called me back after a month and said, yeah, how are you going to do that? And I said, look, I want to take a lot of your primary healthcare centers and education, take them off grid, give them sustainable energy, and this is how much you save. Luckily, I pulled that off with the private sector. He made me the head of that organization. I was then asked to do this on the federal level, focusing on solar energy. I'm a bit obsessed with healthcare and energy because it does affect infant mortality rates. And then kind of the rest is history, if that makes sense. Managed to have a team of the most amazing young people working with me. I was young as well, when we talk about giving youth opportunities, I was heading an organization at 26. And, it just kept on going. It has a lot of trials, but luckily we're here now and we can talk on this global platform about the importance of sustainable energy for the developing countries.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And what a powerful story. I mean, personally, at the ripe age of 23 now, it inspires me to continue pushing forward. And so you talked a little bit about the interconnectedness of the SDGs and sort of that we're here now on this global stage. Well, can you speak a little bit to the state of Energy for All as it currently attends? What are some of the achievements that we've been able to make that you've gotten to witness maybe in Nigeria or through your work with SC for All?
Well, in terms of where we are now, I mean, it is bleak. I have to start with that. We still have 760 million people with no access to electricity at all. So they can't watch us today on this type of platform. And then we have 2.6 billion people, especially women, with no access to clean cooking, which affects about 4 million deaths in Africa alone and has a direct relationship to our climate goals. So that's where we are now. We have been improving on SDG 7, and we have been seeing, which is access to affordable and clean energy. And we have been seeing some real innovative performances, especially for countries like India, who I believe just achieved universal electricity access. However, what the curve we're seeing in terms of business as usual is that a lot of these countries, especially developing countries, are outpacing in terms of the growth of their populations, right? So there's a lot of great work happening, but if more people are born, you don't really feel that impact. And that's why we have to move faster and smarter. In terms of COP26 that just happened a couple of weeks ago, I guess the biggest thing that happened was this initiative with the Rockefeller Foundation, IKEA Foundation, and Bezos, who are coming together for the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. I think it's the first time that we have a considerable amount of philanthropic money coming into the energy access space that's going to leverage a lot more. I still feel like all the instruments and all the different financial instruments are still evolving, but this is a really, really important step in the evolution and making sure no one is left behind.
Yeah, and I love that you brought in some of those themes of philanthropic sector, business, and some of your experiences in Glasgow. Can you speak a little bit more and expand upon some of the actions you think that leaders in the corporate sector, or maybe even politicians themselves, as somebody who's well-versed on this topic, somebody who experiences day in and day out, what are some of those actions that others maybe watching this right now should be taking in accordance for Energy for All?
I think the first key issue is that we cannot achieve net zero by 2050 if we do not achieve universal access by 2030. You can't have a plan and leave 1 billion people behind. It just doesn't work. The math doesn't work. And a lot of people don't realize, even when they think about refugees or insurgency or all these issues, is that it's not like these people want to be them, but they don't have the core basic need, which is energy in their communities to allow them to live dignified lives. Right. So when we are even planning solutions for them, it must be energy for development, energy for economic growth, energy for gender empowerment, not just kind of minimum level of light bulb, something that you and I would never be happy with, but you think it's okay to do it because people are poor. So I think that's one key step. The other key step is that everyone can do something in relation to energy, right? You can use less energy. You can invest in energy. It's probably one of the largest sectors now that integrates tech and youth and energy in terms of the solutions that we're finding on the continent of all these young people getting involved, because, it's amazing because we've left these big grids of things that can happen. And we're saying you can have these smaller renewable scale grids, which is a business for a young person. It doesn't have to be someone old like myself having to control the conversation. We just have to make sure that we push the governments to have the policies in place that also support these people when they come into place. But I guess one key thing that I really want people to take with them is that the climate issue is an energy access issue. The energy transition has to be birthed in not leaving anyone behind, unless it just won't work.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And there's another thing I want to ask in regards to, you talked a little bit earlier about localizing some of these things and businesses. I got to recently work on a couple of projects where we were able to work with folks on the ground and doing like off-grid energy and other opportunities that are in Africa, instead of like going in and doing these things ourselves empowering the individuals to do them themselves. And so through business, or even as you talked about philanthropy. And so I'm interested to hear in this last question, because I don't have you forever, is how can the individual get involved in maybe your work or towards 2030, driving action to achieve, energy for all. I know you also talked about we need to keep up with this pace. And I think that that's something that encompasses everyone. And so just to cap things off here, could you speak just to that point about the individual and what they could begin doing right at home?
Well, first they can join us. We have a Be Bold campaign. We're having an SE4All forum on the continent in Kigali next year, which is super exciting. We have the high-level dialogue with all the outcomes of the high-level dialogue that we have to make sure that we do before 2030. So you can get involved by contacting our teams or myself on how can you do your own energy compact, right? If there's a particular country as well that you'd like to work in or you want to know more about, we could probably help you, connect. What we do need more about, because I am talking to you right now, is just a lot more youth advocacy on the role of energy, and it being so key in, we have to make it sexy like climate, people have to realize that it's so, because it affects so many people, affects youth, reaching their potential with all this tech work that's now happening in the developing countries. Everyone is when they thrive, it's amazing because it's not the same playing field. It's not the same starting point. So there are lots of ways to be, involved. Please go on the SE4 website to find out more, or contact me directly. We have a youth forum. We have so many different things.
Wow. Damilola, a force to be reckoned with. Thank you so much. And congrats once again on being one of the inaugural SDG Vanguard Award winners. It's a pleasure to have even met you now and to continue to drive action as we head towards 2030. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
What a great conversation. And I'm with Jaylan. I wish it could have gone longer. And I love Damilola's call to pick up the pace to 2030, which is a message for us all. Our second inaugural SDG Vanguard Award focuses on SDG 13 and recognizes the organization that has singularly set the world's agenda for climate action. We all now know that climate change poses an existential threat. We know we can't meet our other goals without dealing with it. And we equally know that beating climate change can be a race to the top toward more vibrant economies and societies. Well, the reason we know that is because of our next honoree, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and the thousands of climate scientists they represent worldwide. The IPCC is not just at the cutting edge of climate science, it is the cutting edge of climate science, and they have given us the essential vocabulary to drive climate action at every level, for politicians, business people, and citizens alike.
In recognition of steadfast commitment to scientific excellence and for extraordinary leadership to achieve SDG 13 and advance the Sustainable Development Goals in the Decade of Action, the UN Foundation SDG Vanguard Award is presented to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, and to accept, we'll hear from IPCC Chair Ho-Sung Lee.
The recent report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was a code red for humanity.
For more than 30 years, the science has been crystal clear.
I'm delighted and humbled to accept the Sustainable Development Goals Vanguard Award from the United Nations Foundation on behalf of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC. It is a unique honor to be recognized for the work of the IPCC through the We the People's Global Leadership Awards program. Sustainable Development Goal number 13 for climate action is closely linked with the mission of the IPCC to assess the best and most up-to-date scientific evidence on climate change. IPCC is policy relevant but not policy prescriptive, so we do not engage ourselves in climate action. But the work of the IPCC is the foundation for the decisions shaping national, regional, and global policies, for talks at UN climate change conferences, for advocacy and youth activism demanding action on climate. We understand that these important components involve a diverse array of climate change stakeholders. Their choices and decisions must be grounded in the best available science. IPCC takes this responsibility seriously. We are honored that we are entrusted with this critical task. We are also proud to partner with the UN Foundation, a relationship that is nearly a decade old. The UN Foundation's steadfast support for IPCC's work has been an important boost to our capacity to communicate globally the critical findings of our assessment reports. Thousands of people are behind every single IPCC report, from the hundreds of authors who write them to the hundreds of expert and government reviewers, from the governments who finalize the text to the IPCC Secretariat manages the entire process. And in a sense, every IPCC report builds on the work of the thousands of scientists in all fields whose research is being assessed. This Sustainable Development Goals Vanguard Award is a testament to the incredible work of this vast network who tirelessly strive to ensure the world's leaders have the best climate science and data. On behalf of this entire network, I thank you again for this award and for acknowledging the important work of the IPCC.
You know, the thing I find most inspiring about the IPCC isn't just their world-beating science, it's also that they're always pushing the barriers to forge consensus so that science can drive policy and action. It's the ultimate credibility, and we're so glad to be able to honour them. Our next award goes to the core of the UN Foundation's mission to honour individuals whose achievements can often go unheralded, but who are at the heart of what the UN is about.
The UN Heroes Award recognizes the compassion and courage of ordinary UN staff, the frontline workers from all countries and backgrounds who dedicate their lives to serve the world's most vulnerable. Over the years, we have celebrated peacekeepers. We've recognized humanitarians. This year, we honor the UN's vital efforts to protect fundamental human rights for everyone, everywhere.
In too many places, near and far, human rights are being eroded, equal rights denied. The challenges our world faces, from climate change to COVID-19 to conflict, often take their heaviest toll on the rights and freedoms we should all enjoy. Rights that are enshrined in the UN Charter, rights that really embody the spirit of We the Peoples.
On the eve of Human Rights Day, we are proud to honor the UN's Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and UN human rights workers around the world. In recognition of the courage and compassion of UN frontline human rights workers and their determination to defend and protect the most vulnerable people everywhere, we are delighted to present the UN Foundation's UN Heroes Award. The award will be accepted by the UN's High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, and we'll hear first from some of those frontline workers about what motivates them.
I visited a prison to look at the situation of persons with disabilities in detention, and I met a woman who had been arrested at the same time as her husband, being at the wrong place at the wrong time. She was in prison waiting for her trial, but because she was missing 2 limbs, she needed the help of other detainees to leave her cell to get food, water, and even to use the toilet. When I asked her if she had a lawyer, she told me that she had never seen a lawyer and didn't have a lot of information on her case. As a result of that, we launched a project together with UNDP on access to justice for persons with disabilities. We were able to support lawyers, providing free legal aid to persons with disabilities, help other persons with disabilities to document their cases of human rights violations and advocate for responses from the government. The woman I visited was soon released and was acquitted. It was definitely one of the times where I felt that our work was good, that we had achieved some success, and that there was hope for other persons with disabilities in detention.
My first job was to go to the prisons to identify inmates that have overstayed in the prisons between 7 and 8 years to 10 years in prisons without trial, file for their bail application and for the enforcement of their fundamental human rights. That was my first professional work as a lawyer, and that work inoculated me into the work of human rights. Those days that I walk into the prison yard and I see inmates who flocked to me as if I am their savior, whose hope of coming out of the prison cannot be realized unless I take their note and take their files and file for them. So that fact that somebody can make a difference in the lives of somebody, someone that is hopeless, really motivated me. Certainly, I say we have a lot of hope for human rights if you look at where we're coming from. We may have forgotten that there was a time when slavery was acceptable. There was a time when apartheid was acceptable. There are times that so many other issues were acceptable, but today they are not.
It's actually very rewarding to work alongside survivors, to work alongside victims, to work alongside women human rights defenders and human rights defenders in general. It's inspiring because they have such strength, they have such determination, they lead by example, they have founded large movements, they have changed the way we look at things. I'm always hopeful for the future of human rights because I can see that throughout the decades we've achieved so much change. Social movements have achieved change, the women's movement have achieved change, and the women's movement in particular inspires me. The way women have fought for their rights, not just in the public space, but in the private space, empowering themselves, gives me inspiration and tells me that we can always change things for better.
Greetings to all of you. On behalf of all my staff, I'm deeply grateful and honored to accept the UN Heroes Award from the UN Foundation. I'd like to dedicate this distinction in particular to my human rights colleagues in the field, who live and work in more than 90 locations with commitment and unwavering passion, accompanying and sustaining national and local efforts for dignity and rights. Working with governments, civil society, religious leaders, businesses, and members of vulnerable or marginalized communities, our colleagues, including national staff, often operate in a context of very high pressure and even risk. Many of our staff also spend a significant portion of time on capacity building for government officials, for members of security and police forces, and for civil society groups. The core drive is to translate human rights into practical measures, how to manage peaceful protests, how to set up fiscal policies that make it possible for everyone to have access to social protections, how to ensure that women and girls, young people, and members of minority communities can raise their voices and participate fully in the life of a nation. We also work in the longer term to help governments to strengthen laws and institutions that protect rights, And we seek to empower human rights defenders and civil society activists in all their diversity and ensure civic space is protected so that they can effectively conduct dialogue and work to advance respect for human rights. The pandemic has exposed a raft of inequalities. Health system has been pushed to the limit, leaving the vulnerable without care. Poverty rates have soared. Social protection gaps have widened. Deep-rooted discriminations have even become even further entrenched. And many governments have taken the opportunity of the pandemic to advance new restrictions on the work of civil society. The triple planetary threat of climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss threatens even more extensive harm. Undeniably, we are living in a fragile world. We need to keep bold and courageous steps together to bring about genuine change and advance the resilient societies we need to tackle this crisis. On the eve of Human Rights Day, we're echoing the Secretary General's urgent call for the whole UN to advance a common agenda and a new social contract with equality and human rights at their core. Human rights must be placed front and center to ensure that we're all equal in dignity and rights. This is our collective responsibility, and if we live up to it, I am positive we can move towards a strong recovery. In that context, I want to pay tribute to the work of the UN Foundation. Through your commitment and dedication to the principles of the United Nations and your unwavering support of human rights, you drive and inspire collective action on some of the most important issues of our time. Thank you for honoring our work with this award. We are proud to be in the company of a long line of remarkable recipients. And thank you for your important contributions to our universal human rights.
We now come to our final two honorees, our champions for global change. Over the years, we have had the privilege of honoring leaders at the highest level, from presidents to faith leaders to cultural avatars to activists, sometimes all of the above.
Our first champion brings more than 40 years of experience and expertise at the highest levels of international finance, politics, and development. And it's no surprise that Time magazine named her one of the 100 most influential leaders and people of 2021. Currently, she runs the world's largest international economic body, the World Trade Organization, the first woman and the first African to do so. Her incredible resume also includes being Nigeria's longest-serving and first female finance minister, 25 years at the World Bank, rising to managing director and acting as senior advisor, official, or board member for a string of public and private international financial institutions. That's not to mention serving as chair of the board of Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, being a COVID-19 envoy for both the African Union and WHO, sitting on multiple commissions and, having 14 honorary doctorates.
In recognition of her path-breaking leadership, inspiring example, and unceasing determination to create a more equitable, prosperous, and sustainable world for everyone, everywhere, the UN Foundation Champion for Global Change Award is presented to Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. To confer and commemorate the award, in conversation with Dr. Okonjo-Iweala, we're delighted to welcome Mark Malloch Brown, President of the Open Society Foundations, UN Foundation Board Member, and a former UN Deputy Secretary General.
Dr. Okonjo-Iweala, it is a great pleasure on behalf of my colleagues on the board of the UN Foundation, and particularly Ted Turner, to award you the Champion for Global Change, the top award of the UN Foundation. And, I'm just a little surprised it's taken them this long to realize that you're a champion for global change, having been your friend and colleague now for more decades than either of us want to remember. I've known you as that almost back to your young professional days at the bank, not quite. And you've done it across so many roles. If you wouldn't mind, just a thought about how you have been so clever at finding so many causes to champion over such a long career. Where does one look for change? And when one's found it, how does one make it happen?
Well, thank you, Mark. First, you can see I'm really excited at this award, totally unexpected. And I'm really humbled to follow in the footsteps of so many illustrious people, including Ted Turner. And it's a treat to see you, Mark. It's been a little while since we saw each other. So I want the foundation and the board to know that I'm really, really pleased and delighted having this award at this particular time, challenging time for all of us. You asked me about how I've managed to find all these opportunities to be a global champion for change. I think, Mark, let me say one thing. Being a global champion for change, for me, it's a big responsibility. You feel that responsibility of trying to look for ways and policies and programs that are going to make a change in people's lives. And sometimes I've found the opportunity, and sometimes the opportunity has found me. So it's been a two-way street. I've been very privileged, for instance, to have a career at the World Bank, where I consciously wanted to work in the organization. That's where the two of us met and became friends over a long period. It gave an opportunity to serve people, poor people from all walks of life, urban poor, rural poor, to be able to look at what policies could really make a material change. So I sought that opportunity. Then when I became finance minister, that opportunity sought me. And I accepted it because, again, it was a way of giving back to a country I love dearly and being able to see what kinds of policies, again, at a larger level could really change things on the ground. How do we fight corruption and put good governance in place? What does it mean to have transparent budgetary systems so that money goes where it's really supposed to and is spent in the way it's supposed to be spent? What does it mean to change the lives of poor farmers and to see the excitement on women's faces, when you put in their hands the means like microfinance to make a change in their business or in their lives. So all these policies, both at the broader level and at the micro level, have been instruments which have enabled me to make change. And then you come to the WTO, and I sought this opportunity. No, before I go to the WTO, Gavi, because Gavi was another wonderful opportunity where I was asked to chair the board, and it enabled me to work for the cause of children's vaccines, and then the WTO. WTO is a means of making trade be part of the solutions to today's global problems of the global commons, which affect everybody.
Ngozi, thank you. And, having watched you as finance minister with great admiration as you battled huge policy challenges, including, as you said, real difficulties around corruption in many of the processes of government in Nigeria. I wonder, what your reflection is on that interplay between being a national leader and an international leader. It's in a way slightly different skill sets, but it's also each knowing its own role. How do we, on the international side, support national leaders? When, if ever, should we supplant them? What's the right balance between the national and the global?
Well, on the global scale, you have the opportunity to impact so many people, but you don't touch and feel it the way you do on the national scale. And when you're trying to support national leaders, it's a fine balance because you've got to support them in a way that recognizes the good that is being done in the country, but also is not afraid to speak to them of policies that don't work. And trying to manage that balance is not always easy. But you do not do national leaders a favor by keeping quiet about things that don't work. But once you can make them know this support is in good faith, I think it works. It's always a balance to let them know that on the international stage, much is expected of them nationally.
That's a great answer, because this is obviously a really difficult time when there's more nationalism and authoritarianism out there in the world than there's been in a long time. And, in many ways, poorer policy making in many countries than there's been in a long time. So, that voice of yours gently prodding governments to think and try and do a bit better in terms of policy is critical. Let's take, a terribly contemporary issue which preoccupies all of us, but you have been a leader on, which is this response to COVID and the huge injustice of vaccine distribution in the world. So many of us in places like New York watching this webcast, are onto our third vaccination dose, whereas in Nigeria, it's still, I imagine, probably less than 5% have been vaccinated. So, tell us about how you've sought to tackle that, and in doing so, probably challenge some, not just national interests, but some corporate interests as well.
Well, thank you, Mark. I mean, you've said something that really hits me every day. It is not right that 7% of Africans are vaccinated. It's gone up to 7 now, but what a number. Whereas you have in rich countries, anywhere from 60 to 80% of people are more vaccinated. And, this is so important, because I feel that we cannot have a sustainable recovery unless we do something about this inequity of access to vaccines. Let me also give you one more statistic. The concentration in the export of vaccines from 10 countries, 80% of vaccine exports in the world come from 10 countries. So that in itself poses a problem. And we need to deconcentrate manufacturing and manufacture more in developing countries and in emerging markets. So at the WTO, when I joined the WTO, this was one of the central issues that was really top of my list to deal with, because I saw the opportunities for the WTO to contribute to solving this problem. And how? I realized that it's our members that put export prohibitions and restrictions. It's our members that put policies on about trade facilitating measures. And it is these that make the inputs and outputs for vaccines flow. If you have a trade restriction, that means that one component or the other cannot get where it needs to get. If you put in a prohibition, it means that vaccines can be exported from where they are to where they are needed. So what we decided to do is to do something slightly unorthodox, which is to reach out to the vaccine manufacturers and say to them, we'll work with you to look at your supply chain issues and help you monitor these so that we make sure obstacles in your way, they are removed so we can increase production. Because we had a supply shortfall in the world at one time. If we can increase production and distribution, we can get more jabs in arms. And in return for doing this work, we prodded them onto more production. We also had more line of sight of, actually what was happening with that production, with the distribution, with contracting and so on. Of course, not all of that information can be shared publicly, but it has helped us to move the dial and the needle on the issue of how do we get more equitable distribution. So that's the way we try to approach it. In addition, we have this multilateral task force of the WHO, the WTO, IMF, and World Bank. I also got my colleagues in the task force to meet with the manufacturers, and that put more jawboning, more pressure for them to move towards doing the right thing. And lastly, Mark, values. You mentioned values to me at some point, and that is one of the central things I want to make sure the WTO is about. And one of the things we've been doing here is the trying to negotiate the TRIPS waiver to facilitate transfer of technology to developing countries. Of course, we have two opposing sides. There are members who believe a TRIPS waiver is needed right now, many developing countries. There are those who believe this is not one of the solutions to the problem. So what we're trying to do here is bring the two together so we can have a pragmatic solution to this problem that can enable us to save lives.
Well, Ngozi, it's a fantastic initiative. And I remember going back to the time of HIV/AIDS when Kofi Annan did something very similar to sort of browbeat the manufacturers into concessions on pricing, with the risk that if they didn't, a TRIPS waiver was looming in the background. And I detect a rather similar mixture of blandishment and threat, gentle threat in your approach. And, you know, and just listening to you, if I may, as we finish here, you know, Ngozi, the WTO is thought of as being an organization about rules, but listening to you over the last minutes, I'm reminded you are a person who is about values and principles and passion and making the world a better place. And, you know, I think for all of us to see trade in the hands of a person of values, as well as a person who is a very distinguished economist, gives us all hope that, you know, trade isn't going to be something that's done to us, but that trade becomes finally not the globalization of uncontrolled forces as in the past, but a kind of value, an economic value and a means of organizing ourselves economically, which supports and sustains people rather than overwhelms them. So, Ngozi, Madam Globalization, if you like, but the one who's going to tame globalization and bring a more human face to it. Good luck in everything that lies ahead, and you are the great champion of global change. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. And you talked about values. Thank you so much for that. I think the WTO can contribute so much more to making life more bearable for people.
In her remarks there, I loved how she said that you don't do national leaders a favour by keeping quiet about policies that don't work. And it made me think that all these years, our awards have honoured people who don't keep quiet. They're the noisemakers and the sense makers. They're the risk takers and the rule breakers. And I wouldn't have it any other way.
Absolutely right. And that brings us to our final honoree. Our final award this year is a bit personal for all of us here at the UN Foundation. It's given to a man who has served the world's poor for decades. He also has helped guide our organization from the very beginning as an advisor, a counselor, a distinguished member of our board of directors, and a friend. Today is a resonant day, on the eve of Human Rights Day and the day before the Nobel Peace Prize is awarded, one of many accolades our honoree has received over the years. So in recognition of enlightened leadership, path-breaking innovation, and courageous determination to enhance human dignity, equity, and justice for everyone, everywhere, the UN Foundation Champion for Global Change Award is presented to Professor Muhammad Yunus. We are thrilled that this award will be commemorated in a conversation with another bold leader, UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed. But first, I'd like to hand the floor to the other members of our board who have a few words to say about what Professor Yunus means to the world and to us, and why we are so thrilled to honor him.
Poverty is the absence of all human rights.
The frustrations, hostility, and anger
Generated by abject poverty.
Generated by abject poverty.
Cannot sustain peace in any society.
For building stable peace,
we must find ways to provide opportunities.
To provide opportunities for people to live decent lives.
Those are some of the many wise words.
Many wise words
of the 2021 UN Foundation Champion for Global Change.
My friend.
My friend. My friend.
My friend and fellow UN Foundation board member, Muhammad Yunus.
Muhammad Yunus. Muhammad Yunus.
Muhammad Yunus.
A lifelong social activist and innovator.
He's the founder of the Grameen Bank.
He revolutionized microfinance and microcredit.
Became known as the banker to the poor.
He created a movement to lift millions of small business owners
and women out of poverty.
developed new forms of civic participation.
He helped catalyze a green revolution in his own home country of Bangladesh.
And was honored with the Nobel Peace Prize.
Poverty, he said, poverty does not belong in civilized human society.
Its proper place is in a museum.
We honor him again today.
We honor him again today.
For his profound vision, for his wisdom,
for his passion that still burns.
For his passion that still burns to consign poverty to history.
And build a safer, greener, fairer world for us all.
For us all.
For us all.
Dear Professor Yunus, it's so wonderful to be with you today. You've been a close partner to us at the UN for a very long time, especially in the capacity of the Secretary General's MDG and SDG advocate. And your advocacy has engaged countless people in the mission to unleash what I would say is the entrepreneurial capacity of women and youth around the world. So borrowing from your words, we shouldn't settle for small things. We can redesign the whole world in a way we imagine it, on our capacity to do massive things. And so here we are to celebrate the massive things that you've done in service to humanity as the UN Foundation honors you with its highest accolade, the Global Champion of Change. If anyone has been an outspoken and irrepressible champion of the people who have been left behind, it's certainly you. So let me ask, to begin with, what has motivated you all these years to do this work?
Thank you, Amina, for your kind words. It's wonderful to see you. Well, you remind me of the starting point, how it all began. So way back in 1972, right after the liberation war of Bangladesh, Bangladesh became independent in December of 1971. And I came back from the United States to join the university in Bangladesh rather than teach in the university in the USA. So I resigned my job, came back to Bangladesh to see how I can be useful to the country. And the whole economy collapsed. And all the hopelessness, all the dark things around. You don't see this coming up any ray of hope. Kissinger telling that this is a basket case, and this is the kind of situation prevailing in the country. So I was looking for hope. Say, can I make myself useful at least to one person? I can't change the whole country, whole world. But I can go ahead and do something for one person. So I started visiting the village next door to the university campus to see if I can be useful to somebody, at least even for a day. So this was the beginning. It's a product of the frustrations. So I started doing little things. One thing led to another. Then I started lending money to protect the people who were victims of loan sharks. My only intention was to protect people from the loan sharks. I said, why don't I lend the money before the loan sharks give the money so that they are protected? This is the beginning. I had no idea that it will grow into such a big, big issue later on.
Well, thank you so much. The two things that I take from here is that hope and that every one person matters, and that's a stepping stone to everyone. And I've long admired your persistence to reach everyone, everywhere. I saw that visibly in my own visit to Bangladesh and the empowerment of women there. So when we talk about going to scale, few can match the lives lifted by microfinance. And we've seen how COVID-19 has had a huge impact on poverty. Recently, you've talked about the 3 zeros: net zero on the carbon dioxide emissions, zero poverty, zero unemployment. So how do we get to zero?
Well, we have to redesign the present system, economic system, to address those 3 zeros, because all the mega 3 problems are created by the system. And this is what you're discussing at the United Nations, everywhere in the world: global warming. World doesn't have much time left. It's about to finish. And this is the global warming we have to address. And the extreme wealth concentration, all the wealth of the world is in the hands of few people. The bulk of the population has nothing, really. They are at the bottom of the pipe. So how to change that? How to bring people and the wealth together? That's the zero that we are talking about, zero wealth concentration, that to address the question of poverty. and zero unemployment. I said, this is because of massive unemployment, which is coming because of the artificial intelligence coming. They will remove us from it. So before it comes, why don't we discover ourselves as entrepreneurs? All my life, I focused on entrepreneurship. And that's how the women came into the picture. Women showed their creative power as entrepreneurs. Millions and millions of poor women turned into entrepreneurs. So these are the issues. 3.0 came out of all the mega problems. We do the reverse. We create the other way. Zero wealth concentration, zero carbon emission, and zero unemployment. These are the 3 zeros that we are looking for. And we create a new world of 3 zeros.
The 3 zeros, well, this is about a system retrofit, being fit for purpose, not doing the same things that are currently just not working for the huge inequalities that you talk about. But I'm always inspired and energized by the courage, the stamina, and the inventiveness and dedication of young people all over the world. They are the antidote to the gridlock and the cynicism that we encounter in our daily work. And as someone who has helped to lift generations out of poverty, especially women, what more do you think needs to be done to ensure that the next generation, young people, are fully engaged in the intergenerational leadership and transitions?
I see the future is in the hands of the young people, but the young people are smarter, young people are able, efficient. I tell them that you are the most powerful generation in the entire human history. Not because you're smarter than any other generation, but because you have enormous technology in your hand, which no other generation ever had that. So in that sense, you are like an Aladdin's lamp yourself. You are the genie. You can do anything you want. All you want to find out feel that you have the power, and then ask yourself the question, what use I make the power for? And if you know what the use you're making, go right for it. And they can do that. And this generation is a generation of supermen and superwomen. So let them enter the world and give them the space, give them the opportunity to do that, rather than saying, oh, you're young, still you cannot do that. I even said that definition of adult has to be changed, at least for this kind of purposes. And instead of waiting for 18 years, this young generation are ready at 15 years, 16 years, they're as smart, as able to access information and come up with creative solutions. Give them an opportunity to do that. Let them be creative entrepreneurs by themselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly, Professor Yunus, they've had so much now in their hands, technology, the fact that they will be so much more interconnected in cities in the future where the majority of our people would be, and facing the decisions where they will shape what happens to our planet. So they do have in their hands the power to implement Mission Possible and not to see the cynicism as the antidote, but otherwise. So, Professor Yunus, in recognition of your enlightened leadership and constant innovation to enhance human dignity, equity, and justice for everyone everywhere, we are delighted to honor you today. Congratulations and thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Such a great honor for me.
What a beautiful conversation, and thank you to the Deputy Secretary General. They both struck such a chord when they talked about young people, this generation of superwomen and supermen who it's our job to create opportunities to unleash. All of our honorees today have done so much to unleash greater human possibilities, to overcome poverty, to turn the tide on climate change, to uphold human dignity and fundamental rights, to unlock a clean and just energy future, and to fight for economic policies and systems that truly put people first. Their achievements are their own, but they also speak to the power of community, the force of solidarity, and the urgency of collective change. That spirit is reflected in all our honorees today, and I know in so many of you joining us. I hope you will leave today as inspired as we are to strive to deliver on the promise of the Sustainable Development Goals and the words of the UN Charter. Thank you, Rajesh, for co-hosting with me today, and thank you all so much for joining us for We the People's 2021. We look forward to seeing you in person in 2022. Stay safe, everyone. Stay strong, stay together, and see you next year.